Good morning. Thanks for coming. Thanks for taking time out of the day. And my name's Jeff Griffiths. I'm a certified management consultant and a member at Resource YYC. Have been for a while. The topic today, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the issues that have come up and some of my key beliefs around the way you organize and the way you manage organizations in order to allow them to break loose and do things that you don't think are possible. I'll start though, because I've been chatting with Angie, so I got a bit of a feeling of who Angie is, but I do want to know who all else is here. Just if you have specific things you want to get out of this, we only have a limited amount of time, obviously, but pipe up and we'll try and address that through the session. So this is really a small group. It's more like a fireside chat than a dog and pony show. So if you have anything specific you want to address through this, let's talk about that. So I can't see your names because of the lovely way this thing works. So I guess the next guys on my list here are the Cudmores. If you guys can unmute and just introduce yourselves.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Elliot Cudmore. I'm the Director of Business Development at TSGI Corporation. We're a professional services firm focusing on helping clients access a specific form of government funding called the SHRED program, which is basically incenting R&D, research and developments here in Canada. And we have a team of around 15 people here in Calgary. That's me.
Cool. Thank you.
And Elliot is my son. I'm actually a CPA and the founder of TSGI Corporation. So, we're both here for the same reason. We're both interested in what you have to say today, Jeff. So very interested in it.
Okay. Like I say, and I'm glad you guys are here. Who else do I have on my list here? I have Susan, if you can unmute and introduce yourself. Am I still on?
We can hear you, yep.
Okay, everything went blank. That's always a bad sign. Susan, if you're there.
Susan is writing that her mic is gone or something. She's got audio visual problems right now.
Okay.
She's introducing in chat.
Yeah, she just says I don't have video or microphone.
Okay, and who's our last participant there?
Gary Cox.
Gary, I don't see names. I'm sorry. Gary, if you can unmute and say hi.
Jeff. So a little bit about my background. I'm a well site geologist, trying to find new business opportunities, possibly financial planning might be one area. I do have a question for the Cudmores, if I could ask that.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so you have a business strategy of, sounds very familiar. I got some information from a company called Pinnacle Wealth Management, who provides funding to private organizations. And I believe one of the groups that I was looking at, or we were looking at, had that same type of strategy. Are you a private corporation, and do you possibly get some of your funding through that type of promotion, or like through Pinnacle Wealth?
So I don't think Pinnacle is in the same space as us. We are a company that helps companies access the government program called SHRED. So we help with the navigating the process, applying and defending a claim that they've submitted. So we don't actually ourselves finance or offer funding to companies to do R&D, but we help them access a government program that does.
Yeah, that's exactly the same strategy this company. What's the name of your firm?
It's called TSGI Corporation.
Okay. All right. Might be getting a confused with another corporation possible. Anyways, sorry to delay.
All right, thank you. So thanks. So we got again, small group. My background, I'm a certified management consultant. In a previous life, I was an officer in the Canadian Air Force, and was, I don't know if you guys can see that. I can't tell if my slides are advancing or not. Can you see the jet?
We
Yep.
can.
Okay, cool. So I was an officer in the Canadian Air Force for the better part of 20 years, mostly in the air defense world. I came about this, I became a competency geek through a natural process of having to build up an organization when we never had enough of anything except things to do. The Canadian military is famous for that. Understanding and really focusing on individual and collective competency is really the only thing the military does well. And when I left the Air Force in the late 1990s, I started trying to apply this stuff in the way corporations run. And what I found was that there's things that we were doing and we took for granted in the military, particularly in the smaller units in the military, that are not common in the business world. And so I've been trying to change the world and apply these different concepts around competency and the way you organize competency, because I think if we do this right, the things that you can accomplish with an organization are literally the sky's the limit. As an example, quick war story. We were deployed back in the early 1990s doing covert counter narcotics operations, which is not really where you expect to find the Canadian military, but that's a whole different story. So we were basically dropped in to do this operation to help out on the Americans, and we took everything we owned, loaded up on one airplane, and off we trundled for 2.5 months covert with 12 people, and all of our equipment, radars, and everything else. And we had never more, once we got the equipment set up, never more than 3 people out there on the operation site at any one time. And we didn't think anything of that. The Marine Corps unit that came in to replace us eventually, and the Marines travel light, brought 75 people to do the same job that we'd been doing for 2.5 months with only 12. And if it had been an Army or an Air Force unit, they'd have probably had a convoy a mile long. The reason we're able to do that is because of the focus on individual competency, collective competency, and not just within specialized areas, but whatever it was that people could do, taking advantage of that, and using that to drive the ability of the organization to do things that weren't supposed to be possible for organizations as small as ours was. So the 4 principles that I've developed or thought about for a long time, ever from my time in the military and since, there's 4 key principles. I think it's competency, individual competency, and the collective competency. And the way you use that competency is the key. All the processes in the world don't matter if the people are useless. So the focus of the organization has to be on the competency of the people, because if they got the right people, they'll figure out the processes, they'll correct the processes, they'll make things work, and they'll be able to take an initiative that otherwise is not possible. The key to this is what I call whole person competency. No one is their job description. We all have all of the collected intelligence and experiences that come throughout our lives. And when people are truly engaged at work, they're getting to use all of the stuff that they know how to do and can do, and they're always stretching a little bit. And that's something that rarely has anything to do with what their actual job description is or even what their qualifications are. The key to understanding this as an organization, as a manager, is mapping out what the competencies are within your organization, what you need, what you have, where, and then creating a management structure that distributes leadership. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, but the traditional command and control organizational structure does not generate high quality results in an environment that's changing and where people have to adapt, which you may have noticed. The world blew up back in March, and everything we thought we knew is changed. And we now need to do this in a distributed world with people who aren't in the office. And a lot of companies are really struggling with this. Interestingly enough, smaller organizations are more able to do this because they've acquired that habit. Large organizations are really scrambling to work in this new world that we have. So what is it that drives the performance in an organization? And I touched on this a little earlier. The key to success is always, I mean, there's three things organizations, is achieving their tasks, serving their customers, all of that stuff. And the key to making that happen is always the individual competency of the people. Highly skilled people, empowered to use all of their skills, will achieve things that surprise managers. And the bottom line in any organization, whether safety, quality, productivity, cost, all comes down to competency and the collective understanding of what all of that competency looks like, and to be able to apply that dynamically, situationally within an organization. That's not the way a traditional, org charted organization works. They're great for compliance and command and control, but most organizations don't actually work that way. And when I put in a situation as a management consultant and someone hands me an org chart, that's always a place to start. But what I start trying to figure out is how do they actually get things done? And it rarely has anything to do with the way the org chart's set. And the most effective people are often the people that find a way around the org chart in order to get things done. The key around this is something, I mentioned earlier, nobody is their job description. I like to believe that in an ideal world, we all get to work like dogs. And I've said that before in meetings and that, and people, kind of look at me sideways. And those are people who have never actually watched a dog work, right? Because if I have Labrador retrievers, and if you've ever watched a dog work, whether it's a retriever or a herding dog or whatever, they're totally focused, using all of their skills, doing work that they were born to do. And the best reward is they get to come in tomorrow and do it again. And everybody comes to work with a collection of skills and experiences that go way beyond whatever their formal training is, whatever their formal credentialing is, or anything else. And it's up to organizations to figure that out, because if you can get beyond the paper, you find that there's a wealth of latent skill in most organizations. It just sits there untapped. Allowing that skills, those competencies to be utilized, keeps people engaged and allows the organization to do an awful lot more than it thinks it can do without actually adding any bodies, which again, in the environment that we're in now, where we have to be as lean as we can be, it's really, really critical to understand this and to take advantage of it. So, what the hell happened there? Oh, one of these slides. Okay. No one does everything that's part of their job. I've yet to see anybody that does everything that's in their job description. I have yet to see anybody who's just not doing a whack of different things that aren't part of their job. There's a whole ton of variation in terms of the proficiency that people have, even if they have the same credentials. A lot of the time, this stuff is pretty useless. From a, I mean, it's a starting point, but it's never the end point. I like to think in terms of competencies like Lego bricks. You connect them together in different ways to make different things, and you pull them apart and you connect them a different way, and all of a sudden you've got a completely different kind of person and a completely different kind of performance. Your organization is full of Lego bricks, some of which are formalized in job descriptions and a whole lot of them that aren't. The ability to take advantage of those latent skills, figuring out what they are and moving them along, is what really drives performance and effectiveness in an organization. And it gives an organization the flexibility and the agility to do amazing things. And so when we're talking about competency, and I think this is, I get lost in this because I'm a competency geek, but we're really talking about a set of skills applied in a particular working context in order to generate particular results. And that goes beyond the typical task-based stuff, and it goes beyond, traditional skills, which have no real relationship to the work that's being done or the outputs of the work. So the key for managers, for the people running organizations, is to map out what you've got, map out the competencies. And there's 4 steps to that. And again, we're moving really quick. It's a high level overview stuff. So this is, I've been studying this for many, many years, but I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. First off, what exactly it is that we're trying to do? What's the strategy? Where are we going? What exactly is it that we need in order to achieve that in terms of technical skills, but also the what I call personal and professional competencies, the relational skills, the collaborative skills, the communication skills that allows us to do this collectively as a team. What do we have? Benchmark where we are as an organization in terms of these competencies, and then figure out where the gaps are and how you're going to fill them. And the essence of doing this is it starts as a top-down approach with managers, but it has to come from the individuals. They have to have a willingness to talk about all of the things they do. And I'll give you an example again. Back when I was talking about that counter-narcotics operation way back when, we had a fella attached to our unit who officially, his job description, he was an HVAC guy, so heating, ventilation, air conditioning type, and his job was to look after the heat exchangers for the radar system, and keep all this electronic stuff cool enough to keep operating. But it turned out he was also in his backyard. He was a pretty good mechanic, and he built and rebuilt cars and all sorts of other stuff on the side. He was a pretty good carpenter. He was a pretty good at a lot of things. And so he wound up looking after all of our generators for us. So we didn't need to bring an extra generator guy. He cobbled together, when we were out there in the desert doing this covert operation, out of a bunch of bits and scraps, built a hut, and then put together an air conditioning system for us out of baling wire and spit, so that we could move in and get out of the heat and have a cool place where we could operate from. He was a jack of all trades, and if we had just looked at his narrow job description, we'd have probably died out there. But we didn't. So it was important to not only think in terms of what we needed in terms of skills, but also to really allow the individuals who we had to stretch themselves and push themselves in other directions and use all the skills they had, whether they were, officially sanctioned for using them or not. If we do that and we map out what we need, we map out what we have, we look at where the gaps are, and we figure out how to fill them either through cross-training, retraining, or if necessary, go find the skills outside the organization and bring them in. And put everybody in a position within the organization where they're constantly a little bit out of their comfort zone. So we were always in a trying to be coming to work every day and learning how to do stuff. The saying within that squadron was, if you're 10 on 10 on your performance evaluation, 10s across the board, you're probably in the wrong job. And if you're happy being 10 on 10, you're in the wrong unit. Because everybody from the commanding officer on down was expected to come in, be a little bit vulnerable, and not have all the answers, and come to work to learn and discover through that process where, what we could do, what we could rely on, what we could trust other people to do, and, basically run the thing like a hockey team. You could drop the puck and get out of the way. And people would be moving and changing, and it was a really dynamic environment. And you can do that when you have understanding, and everybody has an understanding of what everybody's competencies are, what everybody's strengths and weaknesses are, what you can trust and rely on them to do. So you can just behind the back blind pass, and someone's going to pick it up. And it's the same in an organization. If you've taken the time to really understand competency and then practice screwing up, basically, so that you can evolve as an organization and find what you're capable, learn your way to capability. This to me is key, and so the understanding what you're missing and then going out of your way as managers, as leaders, to fill those gaps internally by allowing people to grow is the key to this. The last thing I want to talk about, because what time is it? It's at the half hour, and I want to give you time to have a discussion around this, is around how do you empower competency? Peter Drucker, who is, if you're a management consultant, he's like Yoda, right? Drucker figured this stuff out 70 years ago, and nobody, they keep changing the words, but no one's actually figured it out any better than he did. He was writing about knowledge workers back in the 60s. Brilliant guy. One of the things that Drucker said many years ago is that all this stuff that we call management is basically ways that we put barriers that we put in the way of people actually getting anything done. And that's hierarchy, right? That's the rules and the regulations and the command and control systems that we call management. Empowering competency means a different kind of approach to hierarchy. Not that there's no hierarchy, because a completely flat organization doesn't work particularly well either. But there's a right amount of hierarchy in an organization. And when we look at this, a quick show of hands, who here has heard of requisite organization? No, okay. Requisite organization is a theory of organization and bureaucracy that was designed by actually a Canadian, a guy named Elliot Jacks, who's a clinical psychologist and psychotherapist by training, but wound up being a management consultant. And he looked at organizations and how they fit together and everything else. And he came up with what he calls requisite organization, which is the right amount of bureaucracy, of hierarchy, in order to generate performance and release the capacity of the organization. And what he found was most organizations have too many layers. The requisite organization talks about the categorizes work by the time horizon of the jobs that people do. How far out into the future do they have to be able to look? Okay, so at the operational level in an organization, it's very immediate. Most of your things are laid out for you. You don't have a whole lot of discretion on what and how you do things, and you know, you're worried about, in some cases, as little as to the next coffee break. Rarely looking more than a relatively short distance into the future. At the next level, you're starting out, you know, next quarter and out to a year, and on you go. And the interesting thing is, when you look at really high performing organizations, they follow this requisite structure. So you have only enough layers for the distance that you have to look into the future. And if you want to look at what's the most complex multinational on the planet, might be the Catholic Church. Okay. But if you're a parish priest, you can name the 5 people between you and the Pope, because there's only that many layers of management, right? There's lots of people, there's lots of staff and everything else, but there's 5 distinctive or 6 distinctive layers of management, from, you know, the parish to the Pope. The operationally in the military, there's only 5 or 6 layers of management in, like the global war on terror. And that allows the organization to be adaptive. It allows the organization to get stuff done. It allows people at the level, at every level, to know exactly where the limits are on what they can and can't do, and no one's micromanaging them, because no one, if you take out the layers in the organization chart, no one can. And it's all based on this idea of time horizons. And the idea is that everybody at the next layer is supposed to add value to the work of the people beneath them. And if they're not doing that, they don't belong. So there's a right kind of hierarchy and structure. And the main goal at every layer of management in that structure is, it's simple. We talk about 3 circles. So obviously achieve the task, because every layer in the management structure is responsible for the output of the layer beneath them. Achieve the task. And the last 2 are build and maintain a team and develop the individuals. And that's the job description of every manager. And the reality is, the more time they spend on the bottom 2, the less time they have to worry about the task, because that's what the people below them his job is to do. And so the focus of the right size organization is entirely on the development of the individuals and the teams who they supervise. And at every layer in the organization, then the management looks after that as its primary responsibility, because the tasks look after themselves. And then the next layer of management is responsible for making sure that the layer of managers under them is appropriately developed and has the right competencies. And this competency focus, it keeps managers out of your pocket, stops people from micromanaging, but it drives performance execution in the organization. Where am I going with this? In an organization and in a lean environment where we find ourselves now, where there's so much upheaval, where there is so much need for organizations to adapt and be nimble and get stuff done without adding bodies, without adding structure, and by reducing costs to the absolute minimum, and without necessarily having direct supervision in a lot of organizations where everything's being done remotely now. Understanding competency and understanding this, how to structure the organization so that this becomes the focus of the organization, cannot help but create an agile, nimble, learning organization that will be able to achieve things that on paper are impossible. And this is not the way organizations work, are traditionally structured, right? We have a machine paradigm for the way organizations, and there's a bunch of engineers in the room, so no offense to engineers, but if machines are great, but they don't necessarily react well to change. They're very good at what they do, but they don't adapt particularly well. And what we need are organizations that run like an immune system, which are layered, that have a certain degree of redundancy, that have they're embedded, they operate autonomously for the good of the overall organism. And, you know, they can react to the threats they know, and they can react to the threats they've never seen before. That's what immune systems do. If engineers with a machine mentality designed our immune system, we'd all be dead already, right? COVID would have killed us all, or we'd all be dead the next time the flu virus mutates. So you have to create an organization that where this notion of constant evolution and change within the organization, and the philosophy around managing that becomes the way of life, which breaks loose competency and allows it to flourish, creates an environment where those individuals are comfortable taking initiative, learning and growing, and overall changes the relationships within the organization, but creates the ability of that organization to now drive to levels of success that like I said, theoretically are not possible with the resources that you have. So that's basically it. I'm finished beaking off. I could talk for hours on this stuff because I geek out all over it. But I want to move now to just kind of kicking these ideas around. What works, what doesn't work, what won't work, what might work. Any questions that you have around this, and I'll do the best I can to answer them and help kind of guide you in the direction that I think organizations should be going. So if there's any questions, whatever, just shoot, fire away. If I've said anything that offends you, speak up. And if I've confused the hell out of you, speak up.
I think a lot of the things you've said today are full of wisdom, but we as a company have been in the SR&ED business for over 20 years, and we have a nice complement of people, and we have always gone with a very limited number of people in a vertical structure. We're quite flat. And during this COVID time, we have recently spent quite a bit of time looking at continuous improvement within our company and involving people in that process. The comment you made about in order for somebody to actually do something is some wisdom that we certainly found in my world of an accounting and dealing with clients, where you could come up with a million suggestions, really good suggestions, but until the owner of the business it became their idea, did it actually become something that they would implement. So consultants quite often fail to, they produce reports with lots of information, a lot of suggestions, and it ends up being a door stopper as opposed to something that's actually used by business. And the same thing happens, I think, with employees or members of your team. So the way we like to look at them is that we are a team and we need to work together to come up with solutions. So for instance, in our last go round, I surveyed each individual team member and made sure their voices were heard, understood, and made sure that their recommendations were documented and given to the team as a group. And then as a team, we went through them and discussed what we could do and what we couldn't do of those recommendations. And I think that led to ownership of those ideas. And we're hoping, which we're not there yet, that by owning it, when it comes to the actual implementation and making it work, that they will actually make it work. because
Mhm.
ultimately they are the ones that have to enforce it in order for it to be effective.
No, that's really good. You said you guys are what, about 15 people total?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So half of our people, we're a very strange organization. For a typical organization, we have a whole bunch of technical people, so PhD types. And then you have another type of personality, which are CAs, CPAs. And they're very, very different cultures, and the way they approach problems are very, very different.
Indeed.
And we have to work with that. And every job that our company does, they are assigned a scientific group. You know, there's 2 people from the science group, and there's 2 CPAs, so they're peers. They're peered always. So there's always somebody who knows the client as well as the person that's primarily responsible. And so those personalities are very interesting to deal with. I think the scientific people could be described as a group of cats, and the CPAs are a group that are very rules oriented.
Cat herders.
Yeah. So they're very interesting to try to work together and to work as a team. And it's, you know, the other thing too is that in any organization, you have to have fun. And the only way you can have fun is if you feel that you're control and comfortable within the organization.
Yeah. One of my experiences around, like, they always talk about, you know, people having fun and, you know, and people being happy. And, you know, the misnomer from the HR world is that, you know, the happy people are productive people. And I beg to differ. I think productive people are happy people. People who are focused, who know what they're doing, and who know that what they're doing matters are happy and willing to bend over backwards to you know, to achieve success. And I mean, the evidence is all over the place, right? It's the thing that drives it, you know, I saw my whole working like a dog thing, right? The dogs are doing what they were born to do, and they're totally focused on it, and they're happy, super happy to do it. And as a handler, your job is to keep advancing them so it never gets old and boring, right? And people are no different. I mean, when you scratch, you don't have to scratch too far to find the animals in us. And we're a social creature, and we like working in those kinds of an environment. There's exceptions to every rule, but I found that that's something that you can pretty much take to the bank. It's interesting when you mentioned about consultants, right? I mean, our whole job is to influence without actually having any authority, right? Because ultimately it's the manager at the other end that's going to decide whether they, you know, do this or do that. It's their business, it's their company. So our value as consultants is to influence them without actually being able to force them. And that's you know, that's got nothing to do with our technical skills.
Yeah.
Right.
So did you ever have any problems with, I can think of a number of examples in my case where you make suggestions, and the client doesn't follow it, and then suddenly they do follow your advice, and the solution they came up with is exactly the same solution that you've been telling them for years, but this time it's theirs, and they don't even remember that it was you that actually suggested it.
Happens all the time.
Yeah, I find that really quite interesting.
Well, it happens all the time. And you know, it's you know, it's the whole, you lead a horse to water, right? But it's and inevitably I mean, consulting is it's a people business, and it needs to be their idea. They have to own it. I mean, the one thing, and so we go off on a tangent on this, but if anybody's familiar with the, you know, the whole hero's journey thing, right? We get wrapped up as consultants, we get wrapped up in, you know, our skill set and all the cool things that we know how to do and everything else, because we're the heroes of our own business. And yet when we're working with the guy, I mean, it's their story, it's their business. You know, they're Luke Skywalker, we're Obi-Wan. Our job is to help them along the way and let them be successful. And then, you know, if you're Obi-Wan, get cut in half, but, you know, get out of the way, because they're the hero in the story, not us. And so it's hard, because we all have egos, to not be the hero. But we have to. That's a whole different dynamic, and I could talk about that over beers for all afternoon as well. But yeah, that's it's an interesting business to be in.
I think the other thing too is that we spend way too much time telling people things. You know, I'm talking now in a management structure instead of listening. And I think we, just like we do with our clients, we know with our clients that we have to spend a lot of time listening to them, and what they tell us of what they want is usually not at all what they really want. And you have to actually try to figure out what it is that's very important to that particular organization. It's the whole concept of value. Like what do different people value in a car? And you have this huge range of price, and at the end of the day, a car gets somebody from A to B. But there's an altogether different value structure to that. And it's the same with our clients and our people, that we have to listen very carefully to what they're saying and then interpret what that really means. So in other words, what really are their pain points? Because working with companies is trying really to find out what they say their problem is, but what is their problem? And try to get them to that place where you know and they know what their problem is and how do we resolve this.
Yeah, there's two sides to every problem. You know, this is consulting 101, right? There's the technical problem for which there's a technical solution, and that's usually the easy part, right? And then there's the politics and the human interaction around the problem, and that's the hard part, right? Because if the technical, they probably already have the technical solution, or they have the capacity internally to generate it in most cases, but they don't have necessarily the wisdom to get outside their ego and manage the people side of the problem to generate the change and get things going in the way they have to go.
Yeah. To your point earlier, Jeff, it's not one person who has the technical answer. Often it's the collective to come up with that. And then I often find when I come in with, especially I don't know if I'm the only engineer in the group, but I am an engineer. But I do people stuff now. So, but I always find that, you know, they think they know what the technical problem is that they're trying to solve. But if you actually pause and ask everyone to define the problem, typically they're solving different problems. So that's a big part that I find is like, let's define the decision you're making or the problem you're trying to solve. Yep. And then I love the ad. Actually, it makes a lot of sense to me in terms of what's the skill set we have in the room, and just because you're the geologist or you're the geophysicist or whatever that role is, doesn't mean you're the only one that has the answer. Everybody needs to be part of that. And then to build on the question, the listening, to me, it's questions too, right? Like ask good questions and then listen to the answers and let them, like for me, I often don't know the answer, but if I ask some interesting questions to try and understand, they usually figure it out, and hopefully they come back to you and say, geez, you're really smart. And I'm like, well, I still don't know what the answer is, but you guys have it, so that's good. Off you go. Yeah.
The key to being a successful management consultant is asking dumb questions.
Correct. Yeah. Even if you know the answer sometimes, right?
Ask them. Yeah. Ask and ask the dumb questions, because if I ask the dumb questions, I'm allowed, because I'm just right. I'm an outsider. I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
The internal people won't ask the dumb questions, and sometimes those are the questions that need to be asked.
Absolutely. Right. Agreed.
So you know,
Agreed.
blame me for being stupid. I'm allowed, right?
Yeah. I do. And I just wanted to say, like, there's a lot of, I really appreciate, actually, thank you for your thoughts today. It's, you know, it's a good reminder to focus on competency. And I know some of the challenges that I see is building that environment of trust, that they can, you know, you talked a lot about, and I agree completely, that sort of being a little outside your comfort zone, being allowed to fail, speaking up and saying what it is that you do that may be outside your job description. And, you know, I guess I would ask you, you talked about it, you know, it has to come from the individuals and sharing what they're able to do. I've found my experience in the last few years, as job losses have just been all over the place, you know, people are, you know, hunkering down and closing in on themselves and not wanting to share, because they're afraid that they might be the next one to go. So they're hoarding their skill sets and not collaborating in the same way. So thoughts on your experience around, you know, how do you get people to feel that they can open up and recognize where their weaknesses might be and that other strengths would be? And collectively it is better. And I think, like, a lot of us who work in this space get that, but there's a lot of people who don't, who are afraid.
Yeah, like you said, it's an interesting dynamic. And I think it honestly, it has to come from the top, right? I mean, leadership is we have this, you know, this hero vision of what leadership looks like, and the smartest guy in the room with all the answers, and you know, and you're supposed to be, you know, invulnerable, and you're supposed to be, you know, stoic and all that other stuff. If you want to create an environment where your people around you feel comfortable admitting that they don't know, and admitting what their weaknesses is, that you have to start as the leader, and put yourself in that position.
Have the courage to be vulnerable.
Absolutely. And that is actually a strength.
Absolutely.
And it's not a strength that we're not used to it's not a muscle we're used to using.
Yeah, and it's not something you just described it, the smartest guy in the room. There's a lot of things right in there right now that could be the woman in the room who asks the best questions.
Often.
Right? So
Often,
that,
right?
Yeah, our definition and vision of a leader has to change, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got this testosterone poisoned view of what an organization and leadership should look like.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I came out of the military.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
Yeah. Command and control. You look like the guy in the picture. He's been pointing at me the whole time with the mustache.
Yeah. You know, so and the military, we have this, you know, there's this, you know, reputation that, you know, it's very, you know, strict and by the book and everything else. But if you look at the elite military units, you know, why is it that a SEAL team can accomplish more than an entire battalion of regular infantry can?
Yeah.
That's because you've got this trust bond that comes from sharing and acknowledging weakness. Yeah. Because everybody, you don't get through those things by yourself. It's a collective.
Yeah.
And I like to think, because I'm Canadian, I like to think in terms of hockey, right? The puck is constantly moving around. No one can micromanage that. But you have to, you know, your job as a manager is to put the right people on the ice, right? And then get out of their way.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, the coach is on the bench for a reason, right?
Exactly. Right. Yeah. But Timbit hockey, where no one knows what's going on, the coaches are right there on the ice.
Yeah.
With the players. Yeah. Physically moving them around and, you know, hey,
picking them up off the ice. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. You know, because otherwise it's organized chaos.
Yeah.
But and so you can't go from that kind of an organization to the NHL in one step. It's a progressive process, but you as the leader have to, you know, consciously let go. and expose yourself to being vulnerable.
Yeah.
And that's scary as hell, but it's the only way to advance it. And if you do it, again, you lead by example.
Yeah.
So if you're able to do it, give other people the space to do that, all of a sudden you find that the air changes in the room.
Yeah.
And, and some of the testosterone goes away.
Yeah.
And almost always winds up with a better organization.
Agreed. I love the analogy about the Timbit hockey versus NHL. It's a good one. Hope to remember that.
Oh.
Jim,
I mean, yeah.
I have a question here. Were you
Sure.
a pilot in the military, or?
I was a pilot outside of the military.
Oh.
I was a fighter controller. I was attached to a fighter wing, basically third eye air defense radar.
Because I'm just thinking that a lot of these examples could also be applied to, for example, cockpit management.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we found, like, in crew resource management stuff, which like NASA was involved in way back, they found it, accidents would happen because the other people in the cockpit wouldn't dare challenge the captain.
Mhm.
And they'd fly into a hill before they tell the boss that he was going to fly into a hill. That's stupid.
Funny, I just watched one of my favorite shows is Mayday. And there was exactly that scenario where a senior captain on a Korean air flight, his artificial horizon wasn't working, but yet the first officer with like 200 hours or something, he just didn't challenge the senior captain, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, same thing happens in the medical profession, or it used to, right? Like they've now gone in, like, in operating rooms.
Oh, looks like we
to
might
this.
be exceeding.
Everybody, has a job to tell me, the surgeon, when I'm about to screw up.
Mhm.
And that's now the way it's done. But 20 years ago, that was like, challenge the surgeon, right? I'm just a nurse. You're a professional and it's your job, and you notice things that he doesn't because he's locked in. So that whole idea of shared responsibility is critical. And it's becoming the norm in some industries, but it's far from the norm, which is why we lag in productivity and everything else. Rose is about to kick us all out of the room, I think.
Well, yeah. Was there anybody else who had any more comments or questions? All right. Well, thank you very much for everyone participating, and we've had a great discussion. Thank you, Jeff, for presenting on organizing competency. And if anybody has any more questions, feel free to check out Resource YYC or contact us, and we will be posting the video.
Yeah, and if, like I say, if this has piqued your interest and you want to kick it around some more, then that's what Beers with Peers is for.
Yep.
But yeah, glad to talk about it.
Is that Thursday or Tuesday now?
Thursday.
Oh, it is Thursday. Okay.
Yeah, Thursday at 4:00.
3.
3 o'clock.
Well, it's 3:00 now. Sorry, used to be at 4.
Thanks very much, guys. Take care.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it. Bye-bye.